Sabrina Monarch here. Going to talk to you about Venus in Scorpio. She just entered this sign and she's moving toward a square to Pluto in Aquarius. That's going to be exact tomorrow, November 8th. So, an image to start us out with. Venus in Scorpio is kind of like the inappropriate person. It is going, it's Venus in detriment. So Venus typically relates to a desire to be socially harmonic and to, get along with people. And Venus in Scorpio is interested in getting along with people. But Venus in Scorpio likes to do that through being coherent with the undercurrents or the underworld. So you have like a kind of underworld material up, through, and out. It has like Lady Gaga bad romance vibes. Like, I want your ugly, I want your disease, I want your everything. Venus in Scorpio brings teeth and claws and primal energy. And this, of course, goes against being demure or being chill. This Jungian Life made a podcast episode about the demure phenomenon when that was trending, the joke about being demure, and how, it can seem like a status symbol to be wearing like white and beige and just like the most simple but elegant, expensive outfit versus wearing like conflicting prints and cheetah print and bright lipstick and, all this kind of like flashy or like sexy kind of clothing and whatnot. And just this idea with Venus and Scorpio that, like, the Venus and Scorpio figure, so people that you might be noticing during this transit or qualities that you might be embodying within yourself. One way to find it could be the person who's just like really out with it, like very sexual, very raunchy, kind of like not the socially conventional idea of classy and well behaved. And people can really, like, another way to enter into this could be, are there things that you don't feel you could say on social media because your boss would see it and that would be a problem for you? Things you can't say on social media because your future partner might see it, right? Things you can't like on Instagram because it reveals something about your sensibilities. Posts, shares you can't make, clothing you can't wear, desire you can't wear, right? Like expression you can't have because it makes you too much, too weird. And figures that like really kind of flash that Venus and Scorpio energy could be like the strippers and sex workers, right? Like people that are professionally doing something that is taboo by some judgments. And so there's kind of this threshold that's crossed. Because I think in some sense, part of the conditioning that goes back so far, like I don't even know where this exactly began, but the idea of like being tainted or stained, right? Like if you have, too much sex with too many people, that you've complicated your energetic field, right? Your body count is too high. You have encoded too much entanglement with other souls in your body. So whether it's religiously put or it's like a new age concept, it's like the idea that you can be dirty. And then, there's people that are taking that on as a fear in advance of like, I'm not going to explore that. I'm not going to like dress up that way. I'm not going to be taking photos wearing, this kind of attire. I'm not going to explore my sexuality in this way because people might find out, or it might taint my image and my identity forever and ruin my prospects. Who will want to date me? Who will, take me seriously? Like that anxiety versus people that are just like partying and full out with it and being that archetype. So the Venus in Scorpio aesthetic in terms of like art, energy, socializing is really unabashed about their animal hunger, right? Their eroticism. Another theme that could be coming up is that like Venus can be where we get concerned about being, pretty, right? And like smelling good and being like tidy in certain ways. And in some sense, like when that is turns into an inhibition, it's like, can I make that facial expression or can I make that sound in general or in sex? And having this kind of insecurity versus being like messy, raw, ugly in it, like, and that being okay, right? There's a content creator that came to mind when I was thinking about Venus and Scorpio. He's like a man in Scotland. I can't do the accent, but he makes videos just kind of with these really raunchy kind of sexual invitations and like encouraging women like there's nothing wrong with you for having thick thighs. That's the sexiest thing. Like if you're insecure about having thick thighs, you haven't been to Scotland yet. You haven't been pushed up against a castle wall. Like come sit on my face, like he's just so extra about these kinds of what you think is imperfect about you is actually so hot and I'll show you. That's something that Venus and Scorpio does is it's like Scorpio is like all or nothing. So it's not just like I kind of like you or I demurely and politely like you. It's like I fucking love every part of you. Everything that you think is imperfect, my passion will show you that you are perfect. Right? And so of course, like that is like a beautiful expression of Venus and Scorpio, this kind of raw kind of passion that can transcend inhibition. But also just as a kind of like other layer of that, this is some of the edge with Venus and Scorpio. It's like, how do you socialize? How do you bond with people if your idea of a good time isn't small talk? If you prefer like instant intimacy, which in many cases can be a disaster, right? Or like, I think it's kind of funny. I've noticed maybe it's a Gen Z thing, but just like I've had deep conversations with Gen Z people just that I've met out in the world. And upon them sharing something pretty deep or personal, they like laugh and they're like, oops, like not trying to trauma bond. Sorry. It's like, they're so funny. But that kind of sense of like, where's the line? Like what's beautiful, Venus, and what's like ugly and taboo? And like the Venus and Scorpio sensibility wants like everything. It wants it all. It wants like everything that's underneath the surface, like on the table. And that kind of tension between Venus and maybe her, other tendencies towards the slow reveal or different ways that we might consider seduction. And then the kind of martial, scorpionic, like I want it all, and like the intensity of that. That being said, Venus in Scorpio has its own kind of tact or politeness or something, if you will, that apply to if the baseline or the starting point is just deeper or more intense. It doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. It doesn't mean there's no care. It just looks different than conventional relating. So I hope that maybe gives a sense of kind of the energy structure of Venus in Scorpio and just noticing if you are flinching or cringing at other people's expression because they are kind of like expressing something out loud that is taboo, or if you're like inspired and enlivened by it. And if you're having your own internal process of the difference between what you're curious to express and explore and experience and what you think is like proper enough. That's Venus in Scorpio on its own, but it's really interesting that it's also forming a square to Pluto in Aquarius, because Pluto in Aquarius will then constellate, the Pluto is also associated with Scorpio in modern astrology. Pluto relates to the underworld like Scorpio does. So Venus, Pluto, when they come together, relates to kind of experiences of the combinations of ugly and beauty, of raw, visceral beauty, of the beauty of not trying to be so perfect or put together, like the volcanic force of nature type of beauty. And for anyone who's like very much stuck inside of being perfect or not doing it wrong or like looking good all the time, it creates this pressure inside, and almost kind of a masking or a lack of coherence issue, because there's so much managing of the appearance, and then there's something secretly behind it that one may not approve of. One may not approve of their immense appetite or sluttiness or desire or yearning to connect, right? So it's something about your experience of Venus that you might personally exile or judge as taboo. Aquarius brings in more of that kind of exile theme. It also brings in, like Pluto and Aquarius, our nervous system register of the situation, in terms of forms of expression or ways of being that bring up some tension in our nervous system, whether we're censoring ourselves in advance or someone else who's being bold in a way that we wouldn't dare is triggering us. And it's also the kind of social grid that we're internalizing or being directly interfaced with. What would your friends think? Or what would your community think? And if there's currently a tension between some expression that's wanting to come through and the status quo of your community. That being said, communities can also be a place that support and really cultivate and give life to maybe some Venus and Scorpio thing that wants to come through, right? Like the circle that forms on a dance floor and someone going into the center of the circle and the whole circle giving their attention and cheers and, the life of that party, just like giving encouragement and whatnot to the person who's being bold in the center. So just noticing the internal psychological dynamics during this transit of ways that you want to express yourself, ways that you want to love or be loved that have a nervous system kind of like torque or edge or like electric fence to of like, oh, I can't be that way, or other people can't be that way. When Venus was in Taurus, the opposite sign, she also squared Pluto in Aquarius. And during that transit, I spoke a lot about scents and tastes as a Taurus theme and them being offensive, right? Like I was on an airplane and got the download for that because someone sat next to me. I was just peaceful, kind of like, whatever, this is like an hour flight. And this man sits next to me with like really strong body spray, and I was not having it. I like got up to go to the bathroom because I was like, I just can't smell this anymore. And then I noticed that there were free seats on the plane and my problem was solved. But in that moment, I realized it was the Venus and Taurus transit of like, sensuality and that sense of deep irritation and trigger. So I was sent, I was at an edge. And then at that same time, there was a thread that erupted on the digital nomad group chat here where someone said, I know I'm going to get flack for this, but why eat octopus? They're so smart, they're so intelligent. And the thread erupted. Some, people were like arguing about veganism versus eating meat. And then it turned into this whole kind of like conversation about, how privileged to even think this way when there's people who don't get to make this choice. And it was a very far escalation from the original kind of question about eating octopus or not. This is something I've observed over the years is that food is simple, Taurus. But when you have different food preferences than the people in a shared communal space, hell breaks loose, right? The vegan that shows up to the function and just announces they're vegan without, sometimes they're judgmental about it, sometimes they're not. They could just name that they're vegan and someone's like, why don't you eat meat? Do you think you're better? And they get like super defensive and opinionated, or, the families like serving food and someone doesn't finish the plate and it's like, why aren't you eating what I made you? Like, why don't you eat what we eat here? Why do you eat what you like? Like, it's actually a contested thing. I'm sure you've had this experience of different food preferences or dietary preferences in the same space that seem to be at like ideological odds somehow. Right? So that was Venus in Taurus, square Venus in Taurus, square Pluto in Aquarius. On that same trip, I also saw the movie Chocolat on the plane, and it featured, this witchy woman that's bringing chocolate to like a French small town, and like the local priest is pissed about her sensuality and her kind of like tainting the town with her chocolate until, he ultimately gives in to his own repressed desire for sensuality and has his own transformation. That's kind of how it goes with Venus Pluto dynamics. It's like there is a projection of, that person's expression or sensuality threatens me deeply. They are free, or they are enjoying, they are luxuriating in a way I cannot even imagine. And I want a piece of it, or I want them to go away, or I'm just like, yeah, there's like a charge, right? And this is why a lot of people have to open up their nervous system capacity and make this choice of, I want to dress the way that I want in public. I want to have my life force and vitality and my eros turned on and flirt as I want to, or move through the world as I want to without being afraid and like closing myself off and feeling unsafe, expressing myself and being in the world. Right. And of course, this is culturally dependent as well, the stakes and whatnot of that type of expression. But just that there is something about Venus, right? Expression, sensuality that people take issue with, and we have to find our own relationship into as well. The Venus Pluto brings in that kind of drama and the intensity and the projection and the deep psychological undercurrents. So during this transit, noticing if there are forms of expression or sensuality that are really inspiring you and kind of liberating you or setting a revolutionary fire in your heart, At the moment, there's some content creators, some people whose expression on social media is like blowing me away and like penetrating my heart and like changing how I'm thinking or perceiving during the day. Because the power of their transmission, the potency of their share is so alive. And it's like there's something about it that is edgy, like they're saying something, they're expressing in a way that definitely takes some level of like courage and like not giving a fuck, you know? So noticing if you're feeling that, noticing if you're feeling your own kind of revolutionary urge inside to be sensuous or artistic or expressed or relate in a way. Noticing what the nervous system resistance is, right? Like if you have trauma healing techniques or ways that you do shadow work, that could be coming up of useful tools for things that are coming up around this. I'll take this moment to share that my books are open for EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping. So this is a somatic trauma healing technique that supports you in, any issue that you have, something that you are struggling with, or a desire that you have a lot of resistance towards. And it's a somatic technique to tap on points of your body connected to the meridian system as you work through your issues. And I ask you questions and help see the pattern and then guide a tap, like guide you into some things to say. And what this does is it frees up energy that's invested in chronic stressors, right? Like all of the kind of trauma, incomplete emotions, incomplete instincts that are held in the body. We're just carrying that stress around. And so the things that trigger us or the places that we've developed coping responses, we're kind of dealing with holding something that we've been stuck with for a very long time that can take on very deep roots. So this type of session creates energetic, emotional breakthroughs in issues that you might be having. So you can book with me that session, learn more about it, sabrinamonarch.com. But I think it's especially relevant with the nervous system and with this kind of Pluto and Aquarius talk because where we don't feel safe inside to feel certain things or to meet certain parts of ourselves, we create electric fences or red laser beams that guard parts of our experience. So it's like if I'm terrified of feeling humiliated, then I will systematically avoid situations that risk that. So that's going to keep me safe in a particular way. But if I have a really cool opportunity to do public speaking or I want to express myself in a certain way that I haven't dared before because I might be humiliated, then I'm holding all this stress and terror that is stopping me from that thing that I want to move toward. So EFT is a technique to like really get in there and cognitively, emotionally rewire those things. Really powerful. I really love EFT. And I also have an episode on Magic of the Spheres podcast with my teacher, Most Jeff, where we talk about EFT and what it is and whatnot. So I'll leave those links in the notes. With this transit, I think that's most of what I wanted to share. I did forget to say to like this video, leave a comment to let me know what resonates with you. And yeah, just notice right now what's charged, what's really alive in the field for you in terms of expression, sensibilities, values, aesthetics, ways of being that feel edgy or not allowed or something that you want to lean into, but there's some fears, right? Or you've internalized if I behave that way, or if I admit that I like this, or if I admit that I want to be this, it's going to, offend certain people and I care how that offends them. Underneath this, there can be some more subtle layers because when we're dealing with iconoclasm or being shocking or being different or I express myself and I don't give a fuck, sometimes there is some boundaries in that of like, I'm not going to hold your discomfort, right? Like, I'm not going to hold your discomfort for my expression. Get away from me. I'm not available for this. And inside of expression on the internet or deleting and blocking people or cutting people off, that can be the most direct, or like the kind of severing aspect of this transit. But there's subtleties. There's also relationships that you're very deeply invested in, right? And that having the skill to deal with discomfort and charge and projection and rupture that shows up in relationship, and deeper undercurrents of dynamics that are coming up in connection, the same kind of like cut people off, or like, I don't, I'm going to be this way and you just have to deal with it, doesn't really always apply in a relational sense. And so during the like Venus and Scorpio, Pluto and Aquarius squares, there could be some relationship tensions where there is some kind of historic trigger or some projections or psychological undercurrents, and parsing through them and collaborating and having a breakthrough together is the point. And so, additionally, what we consider to be taboo in our expression is not always raunchy or sexual or one of those images that I shared. It could be a personality trait, a way of being that you personally were taught growing up isn't okay, or something that you have, your own kind of personal conditioning around. And so one person's taboo is another person's ordinary and normal. So just recognizing that this transit and the kind of psychological edge and liberation that it's touching could be more unique and subtle and nuanced, and isn't necessarily about being flashy and wild in public, unless that's your thing, unless that's the thing that's moving through you. So I'm going to leave it here. Would love to hear your thoughts and what you're gleaning and taking away from this, and I'll leave it here.